Raz, raz. Za 5 minutek zaczynamy.
Jak pytania będą po polsku, mogę powiedzieć, że ja tego mogę przetłumaczyć. Po polsku.
Co? Tak, pan jest angielski. No to... Gadać ludzie zaczną przychodzić.
Dobrze. Powoli zaczynamy. Zapraszamy wszystkich do zajmowania miejsc. Za minutkę startujemy.
I think it's already 11:45. Good morning still, because we have 15 minutes until noon. So hello, my name is Joanna Becker, and I will have the pleasure of talking to your panelists and guests. We have Anna Gromada with us today, a sociologist and economist. She's advised governments, international institutions on economic and social issues. We have Andrzej Halicki, member of the European Parliament, but also head of the Polish delegation in the biggest political group in the parliament, the EPP group. He's also the first vice chair of that group. And among many things, he will be also dealing with the budget. As other MEPs, yes, the MFF, the future budget of the European Union. We have Krzysztof Krawczyk, partner at CVC Capital Partners, that is a big advisory investment company firm and private equity firm, so welcome. And Marco Pancini, who is the head of EU affairs at Meta, and he's dealt with digital issues and the digital EU agenda for many years now, working also previously for tech companies. I'm not sure everyone is aware that we'll be speaking in English, but I will ask a few questions and then I'll pass the mic to you. If you want to ask a question in Polish because you feel more comfortable, don't worry. I'll try to do my best and translate. Okay, I'll sit down now. So we've been asked to discuss a very big issue of European competitiveness. And why is that? For those of you who follow European politics, you know that this issue is one of the biggest challenges the EU is facing and will be facing in the next decade. Next to security, hard security, next to securing its borders, next to building its defense capabilities, securing European competitiveness internally, but also externally, is extremely important. And really the question is, and this is what I would like us to focus on, how to fix the problem of European competitiveness, because I'm quite sure all of you who are interested in the topic know that Europe's economy is shrinking, and there are many reasons for that, the obvious reasons being the war, the consequences of the war in Ukraine, the pandemic, and so on. So, when I read newspapers and I work in a Center for Policy Analysis, I read that Europe has to prepare for radical change in the next years to come, in the next decade. So, and we have all these big words. We listen to leaders talking about big momentums and so on. But what does that exactly mean? So my first question would go to Andrzej. And could you tell us what this radical change could mean? What do we all here need to prepare for? What do EU institutions need to prepare for? What do you need to prepare for as a lawmaker? And what are these challenges in terms of competitiveness? Let's start here.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really surprised that so many are here, because I've seen very interesting night disco. The atmosphere is very nice, and I'm really surprised that you would like to talk about difficult and tough issues like economy and competitiveness. Well, we would like to achieve, generally speaking, 1% of growth as a whole European economy as a minimum, because the last years, as you know, it's rather stagnation and even crisis. We had economic crisis, we had COVID, we have a war still. So it's very costly. So how to achieve the growth if we are fragmented? So the first challenge is to be more integrated. So you would like to be more integrated because in many areas we are fragmented still, as it was in 90s or even earlier. Well, the best example is that telecommunication. You remember roaming free. This is something what you have, but it was 5 years ago when it was implemented. Why we had, well, one Schengen area, common economy and political integration earlier, and in the most, easy and open industry, which is digitization and telecommunication, we had borders, and even still we have some. So integration is the most important issue. What are the areas of potential growth? We know that we have to be more safe. So military industry, this is a potential area of the growth. How to achieve? We have to find a source of additional financing of the issue. The good example is RRF. So if we had, after COVID time, a special fund, which was also connected with loans, which is a separate issue, to use it or not to use. The idea is to look for a new source of financing, of additional financing for the industry. Military industry is one of them, because on this area, Europe is still split into particular member states' policies. The digitization and innovation is a new area of potential growth, and we had to spend much more money for the new technologies and also for research. We have also more areas to be implemented to the new strategy. The new strategy will be formed by the new European Commission, as you know. We are facing of the process in September, October, and November. We will have, I think, very important commissioner also inside the European Commission, also responsible for these issues. So the Polish strategy is also to put into the discussion some important new strategy or new philosophy, because what we know, the Green Deal has to be changed into new, I would say, there is even a new slogan which could be used in coming future, the clean industry or the clean industrial policy. So we will be more focused on the support for industry, remembering also about the climate issues, but combining both together in much more clever way, not to kill the industry because of the challenges of the climate, but also to help our industry with achieving the climate goals, which are very difficult to achieve, in fact, of all.
When I read because we don't have of course, the set of the new commission, but we have Ursula von der Leyen was chosen as the next president of the European Commission. She will continue. And if you look at her political priorities that were published not that long ago, you can see exactly what she thinks about when she thinks about competitiveness. And of course, there's the issue of more capital, and I will want to talk about that in just a moment. But the big question is, of course, you mentioned the defense industry, but that is part of the bigger question of how to form Europe's industrial policy and how to combine it with the priority of a greener future. So I would like to ask Anna, can we have them both? Meaning, can we industrialize the economy, choose the sectors of the future? Financing is another story, and at the same time, you get that technological green change that we need, and reach those climate goals, and try not to talk about the Green Deal, because this is Brussels will try not to talk about the Green Deal, but the Clean Industrial Deal now, as Andrzej mentioned. So can we have them both?
Yeah. So the question is about energy, manufacturing, and the trade-off. So I will cover in a few words energy, manufacturing, and then the relationship. So as you remember from the physics lessons, we have matter and we have energy. What is and what moves. If you want to shape matter, you need energy. And there are at least 4 parameters of energy we should look at: price, time, cleanness, And does it support or impede our geopolitical position? So price and time are visible immediately. This is what you do when you buy on Amazon. You can see your parcel will be delivered for 10 zlotys in 5 days. That's why we tend to overvalue those signals at the price of these signals that are less visible, like cleanness and whether something supports or impedes our geopolitical strategy. Yeah. So this is about the general things we should think about from the bird's viewpoint when we think about energy. Now, manufacturing. At campus, we focus, and in public life in general, we focus a lot on innovation. Fair enough, this is important, but sometimes we make this mental mistake. We think that when creative destruction happens, it replaces what has been before. More often than not, it does not replace, it just enters into a new type of a dialogue with what has been there before. A good example is, for example, commercial flights that started in 1914, but today, more than 100 years later, up to 90% of the world trade still happens by sea. Why? Because of some of the parameters I mentioned before, especially price, which is up to 50 times cheaper. So why do I mention this in the context of manufacturing? Because sometimes we are very focused on the digital revolution, on what happens in Silicon Valley, who gets richer in Palo Alto. This is all very important. But even though manufacturing makes for a very small % of the GDP, its spillover effects are much bigger than in other cases. So, for example, in the US, manufacturing makes for 11% of GDP, but it translates into 30% of growth, and 30% of growth, and 70% of business-driven research and development. And one job in manufacturing creates up to 7 jobs in service economy, in finance. That's why we should all take it extremely seriously and not think that this is something outdated, something very passé. So back to your question. It is possible to have them both. It will be extremely difficult, and it will be even more difficult for Poland than it is for the European Union. Why? Firstly, because per 1 unit of GDP, we consume 80% more of energy than the EU average. So this is a very energy-intensive industry. So this is about the quantity of energy per 1 unit. And the second thing is about the type of energy. And our manufacturing is still very coal-intensive. So it is possible. It will be extremely difficult. It's better to do it earlier than later. And with some of the ideas, I will come back in the second round because I don't want to consume too much of your...
I just want to ask one more question because we were at the same conference earlier this year, and I don't know whether you listened to this debate, but one of the speakers, Peter Zayan, said that we need a totally new economic model, one that is not based on consumption and production, but no one knows what this model would be, would look like. So my question is, do you have any ideas? And do we really need a new economic model, or do we need to fix the one existing?
So what I know for sure is that we have to look behind the next hill. So sometimes we are very focused on coal and gas, and this is very important, but this is not necessarily what will be behind the next hill. So just to make this metaphor with therapy, because I know it's a big issue with many of the young people, it's like you're trying to get out of the abusive relationship, which is what we have been doing with Russia in terms of gas for the 3rd generation. But at the same time, you don't realize you're already repeating the same patterns with a few of other new people. And I think this is what the European Union is doing right now, because what will count behind the next hill are things that are great in conducting energy, conducting electricity, which is copper, nickel, which is rare earth materials. And the current regulatory framework of the EU makes it more difficult to open new mines. This means that above 90% of those materials are imported from other countries. And it is, geopolitically speaking, it is also important from what type of countries you import them. And if you import them from China, which is one of your main competitiveness threats, this is making your position in the long term much worse. So that's why I'm trying to say that we are trying to get independent from Russia, but at the same time we're already building this dependency on China, which is a very bad thing.
I will want to talk about trade as well, maybe later if we have time. But talking about the EU's industrial policy, we need to talk about money, meaning, so I'm looking at Krzysztof Krawczyk, and I want to ask you how to attract the money we need. We know that, of course, public spending will be important. It will be also important maybe in the shorter term, the new MFF. We will get back to that. But everyone knows that Europe needs also private capital. And the problem with that is, I think, but maybe you don't agree, finishing the capital markets union. How important is that? What difference does it make? And how to attract investors to invest in, big infrastructural products when you still don't have the single market completed?
Maybe taking a step back, the biggest rivals of Europe are US and China. These are huge, homogenic, unregulated markets. In case of China, it's unregulated. If you want to implement a policy, you just need a decree of leading party and done. In US, it's a country where deregulation is a religion. Maybe it has taken a little bit off-piste, but still, these are the two countries which have massive regulatory advantage over Europe. And given amount of regulation in Europe, and Poland is sort of the pinnacle of the problem. We have regulation changing every few years and no established rules long term. For capital, and these are both entrepreneurs who are making decisions to put money into work, and for capital markets, it's always a rational decision. Should I do it, or is there a risk that someone will change rules of the game when the game is on? I don't believe we need a single capital markets in Europe. We need a healthy economy in Europe, because the capital will always follow the best and the brightest. So if we look at the cardinal sins or problems of European economy, is productivity. And productivity is a result of lack in investments in technology and automation. Automation, very broadly speaking. Automation can be also making sure that some tasks are done, not in a factory, but also in an office, in a faster, cheaper way, and making sure that the talent that is scarce is deployed somewhere else. That's the second problem. Two-thirds of small and medium-sized companies in Europe have difficulties finding talent in order to grow. Again, it's a demographic problem that is not resolvable.
Exactly.
But you can actually better deploy, human capital and intellect by being more productive, by being more automated. So if we are able to unlock this confidence in business investing, we can actually start catching up with US. US is spending twice as much as Europe in so-called capital expenditures. So what makes things more automated, more efficient? The difference in productivity is around 30% between Europe and US. Poland actually is half of Europe's average. So we really need to create this favorable environment for the companies to invest.
But isn't that also a paradox? Because you say that the answer to the skilled workers gap is, if I understand you correctly, with the demographic problem in the background, which is, as you said, unresolvable, the answer is automation. And then the societies are so afraid of automation. We don't prepare the societies that, automation is something good, something that will happen anyhow. And now how to work that out? Because, you have all these people that are worried of, technology taking their jobs, and at the same time.
Well, first of all, there is no risk for labor markets because we are in a 0% unemployment environment. So we really should be using people's intellect in a better way. There are better jobs for people, and Europe should focus on creating a knowledge-based economy rather than be, like Poland in particular and Central Europe, a source of cheap labor. Cheap labor is not really a resolution for the societies, for the countries. It's really deploying the humans' greatest tool, which is brain.
Is Poland still a source of cheap labor because some countries are moving their investments to Romania, or because of labor that is not cheap anymore?
Indeed, and that's the whole point. And it probably shouldn't be cheap because it should be used in a better way for better tasks. But it's not the only solution. The other solution is education. If you look at long-term demographic curve in Europe, I mean it's really going in a catastrophic direction, and it will not change. So we are dealing with a number of people that, there will be no more. Maybe if migration will be able to attract more people from outside, but ultimately, most of people here will be living 100 years plus. They finish school at 20-something. I mean, this is absurd. The whole educational system should be rethought. Japan is actually, for obvious reasons, is in the forefront of thinking about that, because why people at 50 or 60 should sort of be out of the job market. There's a lot of people that really want to stay on the job market, but there is no systemic approach to reskilling, upskilling, people being able to take time to go back to school when they are 50 or 60.
Yep. Marco, we touched upon many issues that you deal with on a regular basis. You probably have some comments to what was said, but I have one particular question, because completing the single market in the digital sphere is among the top 5 elements of von der Leyen's way to improve the economy. And there's been a tsunami of legislation in the past years dealing with digital issues. And now what von der Leyen says, we need to implement everything that we've agreed upon, and that's quite a challenge. So my question would be, how do you, as a tech company, American tech company, deal with all of this? But I read an op-ed that was, I think it was published last Friday by the CEOs of Meta and Spotify, and here I want to quote: "Europe risks falling behind because of an incoherent and complex regulatory system." And we mentioned, you, Chris, mentioned the regulatory system as well. So from your perspective of a company that needs to implement that, one of the goals of the Commission to work on competitiveness, tell us how you do it.
This is a great question. And actually, today we already touched at least 3 topics that are at the core of the answer to your question. So the first one, the single market. The single market is a key element for helping companies to grow. Both companies that are coming to Europe and wants to invest in Europe, but also companies that are European and then can leverage platforms like the one that offered Meta, but in general, the opportunity of the single market to really make sure that they can open up to a broader audience of potential clients. So the single market from a digital point of view, but also from a physical point of view, because digital and physical are much more connected than we think, like to the point that you made. Of course, the Silicon Valley is something that is far from us, but what is great is that the Silicon Valley can offer platforms or opportunities for companies all over the world, and Europe is a great example from this point of view, to reach new markets. Single market, first thing. Second, regulation. I really like what you say. Like when we think about regulation, the problem is not really regulation per se. Regulation is great if is opening a market, is creating stability, clear rules you can operate in a way that is effective. When it's becoming a problem is when regulation is conflicting, when regulation is incoherent, especially in the way regulation is enforced. So our expectation in looking at the legislative framework that was created in the previous commissions, particularly in the previous commission, very huge, like a huge number, like a great number of regulation came in the last 4 or 5 years, is that now looking at the way this regulation is enforced, this enforcement is happening in a way that is predictable, is accountable, so accountability in regulating a law, like is it is effective? For example, why don't we think about a competitiveness test for existing regulation and the way regulation is enforced? And finally, is also leaving the possibility for companies to dialogue together with the regulator. Sometimes there are issues that can be solved through a regulatory dialogue. And what we are seeing is instead like more and more regulation and enforcement of regulation happening in a vacuum. But there is a last point that I would like to make that is also very important, which is the partnership between the private sector, the public sector, and the whole ecosystem. The point of productivity is very, very important. Productivity is a core issue that Europe needs to solve. And new technologies, in particular AI, can be a great solution for this problem. We, and our position is very clearly stated in the op-ed that you were mentioning, on top of asking for a regulatory environment that is more stable and is pro-business, we are also saying in this op-ed together with Spotify that open source AI is a great opportunity for Europe, and Europe should look at open source AI as something to foster and help to grow and not as a risk. Why? Because open source AI can help every company or every institution, every part of this ecosystem to take the best of the AI technology and see how this can be implemented in their own organization, in their own structure, to make their business more competitive.
But does the Commission see OpenAI as a risk from your perspective? Because AI is one of those sectors that is seen as sectors of the future, and is seen as the sector where the EU wants to also build its own champions. And I want to also ask you a question about European champions, if I have a chance, because in a second I will see whether you have any questions. So my question is, does the Commission see it as a risk?
So first on the European champions, when we see things like this is a partnership between Meta and a European champion, EssilorLuxottica, which is owning Ray-Ban. So these glasses were developed together with EssilorLuxottica. So I see actually an opportunity for European champion to really partner with the global companies or tech companies to explore new markets and new opportunities. To your question about the European Commission, I think the AI Act is starting from a good base, but where the AI Act falls short, in my opinion, we see now with implementation, to achieve the goal of really supporting the development of AI in Europe is in not making a difference between open source AI and closed models. I think open source AI should have been encouraged through a regulatory framework more favorable. And this is where we believe, for example, in the discussion of the AI Act, that something more could have been done.
Okay, I have tons of questions, but I will. But I know you do too. Yeah. Yes. One comment, of course. Yeah. Okay. First question. Do we have Małgorzata? Yeah? If you could introduce yourself, just please.
I'm Sama from Slovakia, and I would like to ask about the single market. Question about why do we always fight against the standardization? Because, for example, Poland still has zloty, and these are the barriers to growth. Even though zloty is supposed to be replaced by euro mandatorily, there's no exception for Poland, but still the country doesn't make the goal to transition. There's no timeline. Plus, railway interoperability, so goods in times of war wouldn't be able to travel through continent as fast as they should be, because we haven't decided to unionize the traction system and such. So we are always fighting against the regulation from like the Commission and Parliament. And so I would like to ask why it is and how to overcome it to become truly a single market.
Thank you for that question.
So I understand it's the question to me. But, well, first of all, I would like to have euro in Poland even today. That's, of course, for me, the bigger is, well, is safer. So we can avoid many crises if we had euro before. But of course, now the situation is much more complicated because we have to have better economy, internal economy, and you know that it is the process, not the only one-day decision. Even if we will have the political will, this is the separate subject. But it was said about the regulation many things, and I can agree, and also about the, well, champions or big companies which should lead the European position forward. And I would like not to agree with that. Because why? Because we have to have also internal competition inside. And the limitation in Europe, the biggest and the highest limitation is connected with our culture, different languages, different strategies inside the country. So within the states, we have some kind of dreaming about the leading champions and so on. Even in Poland, we had the discussion about Lotos and Orlen. What was the effect? That the price was higher, not smaller, that we had to pay for the monopoly. Why I said about telecommunication, which was the easiest thing to have united one European area without any extra paying. The customer are paying for that, not the artificial institutions. We are paying for that. Why? Because T-Mobile was too strong. So I don't like to have two stronger champions.
But at the same time,
I
the
would like to
Commission
have
wants
very
that,
open
right?
market, very open market with the deregulation, with the smaller number of the also local protection, because there is also a lot of them. And of course, we can talk about how to create and how to attract the money. The credibility is needed. But we can create a lot of money if you would like to have, if you will have the common strategy and the political will. Why? Because after pandemic, we had a special fund, 1 billion, approximately 1 billion euro. USA, in the same time, invested 5 times more. And the effect was also better than in Europe because we had the crisis. We can talk a lot about that, how to do it. But the first strategy, common strategy is needed, and a new philosophy which could be based on both issues. As I said before, the killing industry could be the direction. I believe in it.
But there is this discussion about changing EU merger rules and creating European champions. And of course, there's the internal dynamic of competitiveness, what you what you mentioned. But can we then be competitive globally? That's another question if we don't start thinking in terms of scale. But we could, of course, probably discuss it. Another question from the audience. Yeah, okay.
Hello, my name is Jakub, I'm from Gdańsk, and I want to ask you a question about the AI. We hear a lot from the scientists and the top leaders in this technology about, especially from the United States, for example, about the need of creating some rules about the AI, some restrictions for AI to be used in a good way. We know that this technology has a lot of possibilities, but it has a lot of threats for our society. So, this is the voice from the West. If EU will decide to put some restrictions or AI, will we be still competitive with, for example, China, where these restrictions will probably not be put to use? Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question.
I'm happy to take this question, but then I would like also to have your opinion on this one for the global market. on the rules, I think Europe is on the forefront in setting rules on how to tackle with high-risk AI products. And so from this point of view, Europe is well placed. Overall, on the issues related to AI, I think the industry is developing a series of dialogues, and in my opinion, this dialogue should be global, to set AI ethical rules in order to develop AI systems that are benefiting the society and reducing the possible risks.
I 100% agree. Actually, this is one thing that Europe actually has leapfrogged into the phase of being very logical about how to regulate AI. I mean, if there is a tool that can harm or create crime, that should be regulated, right? And that's easy. That's black and white. If there is an algorithm that you cannot explain how it works, then that's the area that you should regulate. But if you have algorithms that are just helping with everyday life and they are simplifying people's lives and their jobs, that's something that should be absolutely open for businesses, consumers to be used.
Where's Małgorzata? Do we have Małgorzata? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Michał. Yes, nowadays, next to the digitalization, what was mentioned, we have another important field of industry, which is a space sector, which is space industry, outer space industry, which is crucial for security, but also for climate change, for geopolitical position, and for economic growth. I found the information that United States average 6.3 billion euros in investments driven by larger growth stage funding rounds compared to 1.4 billion euros from Europe. Also there is a problem that many companies and startups are moving from Europe to United States in space industry because of lack of opportunities. So I would like to ask, what is your perspective on space industry in EU?
And this could have very negative consequences in terms of diversity of different languages and different way to think included in the model, but also in health research. So opportunity, but also we need to watch out that this opportunity can really be exploited.
Hi, I'm Asya Filipova from Bulgaria, and I guess my question is mainly pointed at the lady, because she mentioned that Poland uses per unit of GDP, I think you said, far more energy than the average for the EU. I would like to ask you to expand on this, like what the reasons for this are, and maybe in the future, how do you see this changing? And also a question maybe aimed at all of you is, how do you see, what's the place of renewable energy in the future, and is this the way to go, or maybe nuclear or other types of energy? Obviously, we should diversify, but in general, your thoughts on the future in terms of when we account for geopolitical aims, but also economically, economic sustainability, what do you think is the best path to go? Thank you.
Anna, do you want to start with the first question, and then I'll ask
just
your
one
comments.
sentence on the first and one sentence on the second. So we have numerator and denominator. If we want to arrive at the better number, we can play with either of the two. So one problem is that is with the added value. So you can basically produce other types of products with the bigger added value, which means that the GDP will increase, which means the energy will decrease. The second thing is that you can switch between the sectors. Some are more energy intensive, like industry, some are less energy intensive, like services. And the third is that you can play with a type of energy that is fueling your industry, which in Polish case is coal. And in other cases, it could be nuclear. That's why also France had much better inflation rates than any other European countries, because its economy was largely fueled by the nuclear energy, which didn't have such a high cost. On the second question, sometimes when we think of social change, it's very easy to point on those big goals. But as one of my first trainings comes from development studies, sometimes I have this propensity to look at what is already there and help it grow. So when we think about Poland and look what's already there is that we are spending more than 30 billion euros per year on armaments. What's already there is that we have some state-owned companies such as KGHM, and how can we slightly tweak those things to our advantage? So in the first case, I would say that at the very, very, very core of Poland's armament purchases should be the idea that we will not need to purchase them in the future anymore because we will make them ourselves. So what I think, how does it translate into today's negotiations is that we should purchase as much as possible with the energy, with the technology transfer, which is what we are already doing with, for example, South Korea, but not with all the partners, but I think it should be at the very core of every treaty that is signed. And with KGHM, I'm mentioning it because it's producing copper and silver, and this is the gold of the next century. Yeah, thanks.
Krzysztof, would you want to?
I like the sort of small steps approach, the low-hanging fruit. 25% of CO2 emission in Europe is transportation. You can actually change that massively by putting more emphasis on railway instead of airlines and road transportation that is vast majority of that CO2 emissions. So super important to invest in renewables. There's no other way. But actually energy efficiency is equally important. There are massive losses of energy that wouldn't have to be produced, wouldn't have to emit CO2 if the grid was more efficient. And these are the relatively easy to fix.
Do we have more questions? We don't. So I still have a few minutes. So I want to maybe talk about this external dimension as well, because we mentioned it a few times, but talking about the US and China and Europe's competitiveness in terms of those. There's this issue of reciprocity in terms of what China is doing, and America with the IRA, for example, as well. So there's this term, how should Europe build its tools? And that's probably my question, to be able to reciprocate. And there's the issue of de-risking from the economies. In the past years, we've had problems with, this big issue of supply chains, securing supply chains, and that's also linked to that industry policy, to semiconductors, to the health sector as well, that you, Andrzej, mentioned. So a question, when I listen to podcasts as well, there's this big question. Is the US and China at economic warfare or not? Or are these only, and how is Europe supposed to find its way here? So let's, devote the last minutes also to this external dimension. And whoever would like to start, Andrzej, would you like to start?
Well, in one minute, it's very difficult to say and to answer. But generally speaking, well, if we compare USA and Europe, well, we have more inhabitants, so more citizens, because 450 million, then 300 million. Well, the size of economy, well, approximately similar. So why not to be stronger and bigger than USA? We have to be modern, and this is the reason why we have to invest and support these new technologies in all the services and industry. Because today this is the blood for the economy, so we know it very well. But of course there are other areas which are out of European policy. Health is one of them, military area is the second one, connected with security, but the real growth is connected with enlargement. And I would like to say that I have the feeling that situation we are living now is very similar to 90s. So we are facing absolutely strategic decisions, political and economics. And if we are thinking about the future, so the decade, so we can start today in the Polish also presidency, during our presidency probably also building a new Europe for 30s and 40s, which will be much bigger, much stronger, also has to be much more and better developed. And also covering the voters and the people's expectations, including the social issues too. Is it achievable? Yes, I feel that we can.
Yes, you mentioned the reciprocity rule. Actually, in anthropology, some anthropologists are looking for human universals, and one of the very, very, very rare human universals, that is rules that apply across time and space, is the reciprocity rule. So I agree it exists, but it's not always one-to-one reciprocity. Let me give you an example. If the US wants to send its wine to Europe, it needs to pay the tariff of 26%. If Europe wants to send its wine to the US, it pays 1%. So sometimes this reciprocity is in the long run, but not one-to-one. But on the main points, I would just recap what I've said already. That is the energy revolution, clean energy, cheap energy, thinking what is behind, already behind the next hill. That is the rare earth metals. That is all the things that will be useful for the next electricity revolution. Thank you.
So I think we already described today some measures that can be taken in order to make Europe more competitive and complete the single market. Absolutely, is a no-brainer. Increase productivity and competitiveness through adopting technologies like open source AI that can really benefit the whole ecosystem. But there is a third one that I mentioned that I think it's very important and relevant to your question, which is the partnership. Now, on the partnership, I believe that there is a substantial difference between partnering European companies and European governments with US and partnering with China. With US, we share values, we share an history, we share willingness to work together in a global market to be successful. And so I think we should not forget that this is an opportunity, not only a risk.
Krzysztof, I don't want to ask a political question, but the American elections are coming. In terms of markets, in terms of investments, in terms of decisions, are we in Europe preparing for either or administration, meaning there could be a Trump administration, and we know what that might mean. So yeah, just to end our discussion on a more political note, but in terms of what you do, how do you look at it?
I wish it was a more optimistic note. I think we are in a century of uncertainty, and I think that's the answer to your question. The markets are getting used to uncertainty. There's been so many black swan events over the last 4 years that if you look 25 years back, it's unprecedented combination of COVID, war in the Middle East and instability in the Middle East, NATO facing a risk of a collapse. So it's just a new reality that we have to live in. The golden era of post-Second World War is gone, but hopefully there is something at the end of this tunnel that humanity will exit from that uncertainty period better, wiser, and sort of more sustainable.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your answers. Have a great day. You have Radek Sikorski in the afternoon, and you have Roberta Metsola coming from, I don't know, all over Europe because she's everywhere. And so a good chance to meet and ask her questions before she returns to Brussels and works on with all of the members on all of this. So have a good autumn, have a good end of campus. See you around. Thank you very much.